It's just a time to get to know one another and to hear from them, to hear their heart. And so we just want to kind of get to know you. Since your wives aren't here, I would like if you could just introduce your family and tell us how God led you into missions. Whoever would like to go first.
Want me to go first? Okay. Is this on? There we go. Okay, my name is Stephen Linetti, and I'm the fifth son of 6 boys, raised in an Italian cultured family in St. Paul, Minnesota. I told the Sunday school I was with this morning that I'm so grateful that my mother was German and Dutch, because if you're all Italian, you need some structure in your life. So we thank Mom for that, but we never gave her any credit because we were all Italians. I grew up on the east side of St. Paul, Minnesota, and I don't like correcting the pastor, but I'm going to. It's St. Paul, Minnesota, not Minneapolis. Minneapolis, St. Paul is the capital of Minnesota. And Minneapolis gets all the credit. I don't understand why, but I'm a little protective of that. So, as I said, I grew up in St. Paul. I was raised Catholic, went to parochial school up into 5th grade. 6th grade, I went to public school. 7th grade, I was in junior high, and that was the end, or the beginning of the end of me. I had an art teacher, and I loved art, and he shared a philosophy of life with me that nobody can tell you what to do. And I adopted that philosophy of life, carried it into high school. 16 years old, I moved out of my parents' home, continued in school, but I just didn't want to live under the authority of my father, and pretty much ruined my life until I was about 19 years old, and I read a book called Late Great Planet Earth. Maybe some of the older folks here remember that book, Hal Lindsey. It was all about prophecy. And I was of that era. It was 1973. I was of that era where people wore their hair long and revolted against the war in Vietnam. So I was of that era. And I was actually at the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago, on the wrong side, mind you, Students for a Democratic Society. So through reading that book, God connected the dots that I had from being instructed in the Bible, in parochial school and everything, but I had never understood the gospel. And I understood the gospel, and I came to saving faith. I didn't know what happened to me. I remember praying because I read about the rapture, and I'd never heard about the rapture. And I just prayed that evening, God, if you're real and your son Jesus Christ comes back to receive his own in the air, I said, I know I'm not one of your own, and I want to be. That was my prayer. And he saved me right there and then. And such peace flooded my life. I just couldn't believe it. My girlfriend, now wife, knocked at the door that morning, and I answered the door, and I said, Mary, all that Jesus stuff is true. And she thought I was in a cult. She just, oh my gosh. So 2 weeks later, I had the joy of leading her to the Lord with my limited knowledge of what the gospel was. And she had a girlfriend who was also saved off the streets around that time. God was working in the lives of youth at that time in a big way. And so she was already going to Bible school at New Tribes Bible Institute. New Tribes is a mission that's dedicated to reaching tribes until the last one is reached, unreached people groups. And she came home for Christmas, and she wanted to, Mary, my wife, was her project. And she took her out to lunch and tried to evangelize her, and Mary tried to help her understand that she was a believer, but she didn't have the words. She didn't have the formula. And so she came home and she said, Stephen, I don't think Sandy thinks I'm a believer. So they went out the next week, and as she's explaining to her, all the details of the gospel, Mary said, no, I believe all that, Sandy. And Sandy said, Mary, are you a believer? And Mary said, I believe I am, yes. And she said, but how can you be a believer? You're living with your boyfriend. Well, Mary came home and told me that. And I said, so what's wrong with that? And I looked into Scripture, and I found out what was wrong with that. And so I sent her home to her mother's. This is after living together for 2 years. And our friend said, what is this, a purification rite? But we got married 3 months later, and we just celebrated 51 years of marriage. So she stuck with me for that long. Can't believe it. But because Sandy was from that Bible school, New Tribes, we went to a conference that spring. And I heard missionaries every evening talking about tribal people. And they showed these most outrageous slideshows of these tribal people. I couldn't believe there were still people in the world like that lived back in these jungles. And every night I went up and thanked them. I said, you guys are so noble. And they just shook their heads and they said, we're not noble. Stop that, you know. What about you? How about you? Could you take the gospel? I know. Every night, no. Finally, the last night, they must have been talking together. I think they were. A guy asked me again, how about you? And I said, no, I could never. He said, why? And I said, well, I don't know the Bible. And he reached down and under the pulpit and he gave me an application to Bible school. And he said, pray about this, fill this out, see if God will, you know, bring you into the Bible school. So this was a great adventure for me. I mean, I was wide-eyed, and, you know, we made it a big deal to pray about it. We wrote it out. We sent it in. We got accepted. And it was like God wrote on the sky, accepted. And I thought, wow, God answered our prayers. Well, I learned later that they accept anybody that breathes. But that didn't daunt my enthusiasm at first, so I really enjoyed it. But that was the beginning of being called to the tribes. And there were tribes that were from Indonesia. The field of Indonesia was just opening for new tribes at that time. They were just sending missionaries over. And I thought, man, I'd love to be on the ground floor of that work. And that's how we ended up in Indonesia.
I should have gone first. Well, I once had long hair too, and I don't know what else to say though. Yeah, when I was born, yeah. Well, I grew up, as you guys know, maybe 15 minutes from here, where my parents still live. I think they built the house right before I was born. And Christian home, heard the gospel much growing up from many different avenues, church and parents and Christian radio and all these different things. And I was pretty young, I guess 4 to 5 years old, when I went forward and said, I want to be a Christian. I want to be saved. I want to be baptized. I remember going and saying, I want to be baptized in front of the church. And he said, why do you want to be baptized? I said, because Jesus died for my sins. And so I was baptized, and from that time forward, I was your typical child. I think I had, my parents are here, so I'm afraid what to say. I was a great child. No, I wasn't. Just don't ask them later. But I guess a typical child, and thought I was a Christian. I remember I was having physical therapy in my early teens, and one guy who was working on my leg that was just hurting, my knee that was hurting, and he asked me then, he says, are you going to heaven? And I said, yes. He said, how do you know you're going to heaven? And I said, because Jesus died for my sins. And he said, what does that mean? I was thinking, it means he, what else do I say here? But I still remember that, and then I kept going to my later years of high school, and some of the, some sin issues started to really pop up, and then my first year of university, away from authority, away from constraint, I think it became really clear in that year that I wasn't a Christian, and towards the end of that year, it wasn't a message I heard, it wasn't, someone came and talked to me. I'd heard the gospel, but just through that, towards the end of that year, I just remember sitting in my dorm room, and something had been going on in my mind before is, how can you say you're a Christian if you're doing all this stuff? If you're not really doing anything towards being a Christian, you're not acting like one. And through a series of events and things that were happening, I just remember eventually just coming to the point in my own dorm room and just saying, I'm just thinking, okay, I got to go one way or the other. Either I'm going to say I'm a Christian and live like a Christian, or I'm not going to, I'm just going to stop saying that. And it was clear in my mind then that I'm happy to say I'm a Christian, I'm happy to go to heaven, but I'm not happy to obey. I'm not happy to obey the Bible. I didn't, it was really a lordship issue was the issue, right? I was happy to have a Savior. All this other stuff is like, but the Lord just really broke me through seeing my sin. And I remember praying that just by myself, saying, Lord, okay, I know this is true. And actually, I do want to follow you. But I don't think I can give up my sins. And I just said, if I'm going to give it up, you're going to have to change me, because I'm not ready. I don't think I'm able to stop doing the things I'm doing. And I just remember waking up the next morning and just like, I felt different. I know it's not feelings. That wasn't the whole thing. But I just remember the next morning thinking, whoa, I don't think I desire those things anymore. And then opportunities came to go back to those things. And I said no to them, and I shocked myself. It's like, whoa, did I really just not go with the crowd there? Did I not go back to that? And I didn't. I was surprised. It's like, oh, maybe the Lord really did change me here. And then after that first year of college, I started to want to read the Bible. I had my Bible that I had when I was younger, and I took it to college with me, and I put it in a drawer beside my bed. But sometimes I would open and look at it, just like it's there. But I wasn't reading it. But then after that, I wanted to know the Bible. I just wanted to know what was in it. And started listening to sermons and whatever I could. Started reading books, John MacArthur books. One that I had, Hard to Believe, that was held together by tape. It was barely holding together, but I just remember that was the only book, that was the book I had, so I read it, and I pretty much just cried as I read it, because it's like, whoa, this is my testimony here. And then I went back to Barnes & Noble at the time, because that's the only bookstore I knew, and I picked up The Gospel According to Jesus, and I read that, and I thought, whoa, he just described me all over again, right? This is what I went through. So anyway, I went through that and just started listening to sermon after sermon and just trying to learn what I could. Eventually, I graduated college, came back to this area, started teaching in a school in Pittsylvania County, and I started to get asked to teach at church. And so I did. I started to teach some, and I really enjoyed it. It seemed like people were helped, and eventually it seemed like the guys leading the church thought maybe the Lord wanted me to go preach, and I had been having that kind of thoughts before. Hey, I think I enjoy this, and I do want to really study the Bible, but I didn't even know what a seminary was. So I remember I was telling someone I really want to go somewhere where they teach you how to know they teach you the Bible. They say, you mean like a seminary? And I was like, I don't know. I don't even know what a seminary is, but sounds good. I just want to go somewhere where they will teach me the Bible. And anyway, found out about the Master's Seminary, went out there. And then I applied, and they let me in for some reason, strange reason. And so I'll come back to that in a second. Dana, my wife, Dana, she's from Los Angeles County, the San Fernando Valley. She grew up to parents who went to church, but weren't really living like Christians, and somewhat of a rough childhood because of that. And she herself went through her own issues and thinking about life, some that even led her to being put into the hospital, and her dad just kind of pleading to God, just like, save my daughter. So he just thought she's gonna die, because she was not doing very well. And the Lord did save her through a teacher at her Christian school. She was going to a Christian school. The teacher invited her to church, and she went and ended up being saved. So she started working at the Master's Seminary, and she was there when I got there. And I thought, hey, why get an education when you can get a wife? So I was like, I don't care about the education, I just want the wife now. So no, I got both. That was good. And so we met there, really just hanging out with mutual friends we had, and got to know each other. And through certain events, we got married in 2011. But all that to say, to go to how we got to London is when I was finishing my MDiv. I had finished my MDiv, and I was working on a Master's of Theology degree, and it come through all the classwork. I just needed to write a thesis, and there was this ministry in London called Grace Life London, two guys who had gone to the Master's Seminary and left England to go there and went back to plant a church. I knew about them, but I didn't know the guys personally, and so I thought I was going to Virginia. Matter of fact, when Dana and I started dating, like in the first few dates, maybe even the first date, I just said, you need to understand I'm going back to Virginia. I'm thinking she's from California. This may not go well, right? To go back to this place called Danville, Virginia. And I said, are you okay with that? Like if you're not, then we should probably stop now while we're at the beginning. And she said, no, I'm okay with that. I thought, oh, okay. Well, will you marry? No, I didn't say that yet, but I was getting there. But we got there. Why did I say that? Because when we were getting married, actually the same month we got married, they were planning the church. And I thought I was coming back here to Virginia. I thought I really had my mind set on this is what's needed. I need to go back to that area. They need pastors. They need expository preaching. I'm doing that. And one January in 2015, these two guys that these two men would know, one named Keith Essex, who was our Bible survey professor, and another named Ray Maringer, who was dean of faculty at the time, or dean of students at the time. They both approached me at different times on this one day, talking about this ministry in London, and I'm thinking, and they said, oh, they're looking for someone to come join. We think you're the guy. I was just sitting there thinking, what are you talking about? Yeah, I'm going to Virginia. I've never left the country. I know nothing about London. I know nothing about, what are you talking? That's what I'm thinking. I really respect these guys, and I didn't say this to them, but I'm thinking, you definitely have the wrong guy. And they said, well, if you're interested, you should go talk to Tom. He's in town. And I went to talk to him just out of respect for them, thinking, I'm not going to London. And we talked to him, and he said, oh, just come out and visit. And I thought, what are you guys talking about? I was like, well, okay, I have to go because I really respect these guys. I should at least go and talk to Dana. She said, okay, let's go. And I thought, oh, we're going to have a 10-day holiday. This is going to be great in London. Never left the country before, but here we go. So we went, and we were planned to be there for 2 Sundays. We were there for one Sunday, slept in the basement of the church. At the end of that one Sunday, we went to the basement, getting ready to go to bed. She looks at me and says, what do you think? I said, I kind of like it. She said, me too. And we were just like, are we really saying this? This is really weird because we have nothing to do with London. And when we talked to them later, we just said, I think we would come. And we went later that year, at the end of the year. That's the brief version, which was kind of long.
But you didn't plan to stay, right?
No, well, I didn't even. I didn't even. We spent a couple of months raising support, which is, we'll just set that aside now. A couple of months is not enough time, and we had enough support for probably 3 or 4 months. And I just told Dana, like, okay, we don't have kids. I'm at the end of my studies. Hey, let's go help them a few months. We can't stay on this, but we'll go. And we didn't leave. So, yeah, we were telling people, oh, probably a year or two, we may go out there and we'll see what happens. But no, I wasn't really thinking this is the final stop. I thought, oh, we can go help them, and then we'll see what the Lord has for us. And so far, it's been what the Lord has for us. So we're still there.
Excellent. What advice would you give someone who may be considering missions? Church. Yeah, this will be good for the school tomorrow, maybe, but or this week. Trying to challenge younger people anybody really, to consider how they can be involved in missions. So, any thoughts on?
Oh, I'll go first, and then he'll correct it. Good. This will go great. That's why he's here, to correct what I say. I'd say, you say anyone considering missions. I'd say be open to anything, and that's staying or going. Just be open to whatever the Lord allows for you. Anytime I come here, I can't help but laugh because I think of Lance is here, and I'm in London. And we're both surprised. Like, how did he end up here, and how did I end up? So just be open to wherever the Lord will have you. Another thing would be is go see what's out there. Go visit things out there. And not just go see the country. Not just, oh, let me go to China and check the food. Like, no, not that. Like, actually go and see ministries. Be around what's happening out there, and kind of let what had to happen to me is my mind had to expand. As I was saying this morning, all I thought was Virginia and even U.S., and then the Lord just kept expanding my mind. Now I'm just thinking more globally. And so I would say just see what's out there, and test those things out. Talk to your leadership. You may say, man, I'm thinking about missions, and they may say, you're thinking what about? You need to work on some things, and you should listen to that. They have areas where you may need to grow spiritually, or things to think about. But even if that gets checked, then you need to think about, there's a lot of things to think about. Your own debt. Are you in debt? That's something to think about. You don't want to go out in the field and have your own debt to take care of here. Your life situation. But overall, I would think of talk to your leadership, pray about it, and see what's out there.
I don't have a lot to add. I'd stress talking to leadership. I'm a big one on the church, and that people that are going into missions need to have a church that sends them. They need to be approved. I believe that missionaries should be elder, qualified men that are sent out. We have a man right now that's training to go unreached people groups through Radius Mission down in San Diego. And he's 1 year into his 2-year internship of approving himself as an elder. And so that's a big piece for me, that the church can be behind those that we send. Adam was talking this morning, they sent their best in Acts. They sent their best. Can you imagine sending out Paul? I'd want to keep him in Antioch. But they sent Paul out. But it was the Spirit of God that worked on our hearts. So, yeah, the one component I would say is if you are interested in missions, I don't see a lot of young people here tonight, but I will tomorrow. And I'm going to tell them, read missionary biographies. You will get the bug. If you read missionary biographies and it doesn't move your heart, there's something wrong there. And even if you don't end up going, through reading those missionary biographies, you'll want to help missionaries do the work that they're involved in. So those are a big piece. Yep.
So when you went to the field, first of all, how did you not become the next Jim Elliott? You go to a tribe. How did you make contact? How did you get in there? And what was some of the challenges, adjustments for you and Mary?
Well, I have to laugh because New Tribes Mission is a post-World War II blue-collar mission. And they have mottos like this: 2/3 of God is go. Okay? Took a while, I know. And they would say things like, most degrees are below zero, because, you know, they were talking about tea-drinking, golfing missionaries, and they said, we're the core, you know, we go right out, we're the tip of the spear, and all that stuff. So, you know, New Tribes was a very interesting group of people, hardcore. And so I had to laugh when I tallied up how many years I spent in preparation before I preached the gospel. It was 9 years of preparation with New Tribes Mission. None of it accredited, not a bit. But it was 4 years of training in the States, a year of learning the Indonesian language when we went over to Borneo. That's where we learned the Indonesian language, the national language. And then it was an additional 4 years when we were in the tribe to break down the language, develop an alphabet, learn their culture and language before we began to teach the gospel. So 9 years. And I had people coming in studying in our hymnody because we developed indigenous music patterns, so ethnomusicology. I used to teach it at Liberty. You know, just how can you develop indigenous music forms. So we did that, and I had people coming in getting their master's degree off the work that I did, and I didn't have a degree. And I thought, what's up with this? This is not right. Not right at all. But, yeah, so all I can say is it was a long road. It was a long road. But you need to understand, it's a different type of work. I mean, this is not that. We're not doing the same thing. But that's every bit as important, especially in London, especially at this time where you have such an influx of Islam. He's working on cutting edge stuff. This is exciting. So I'm really behind your work and Tom's work there. Praise God.
What's it like serving in the motherland? That's how they view themselves, right?
Yeah, what's it like there? It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that Steve says that because when I read missionary biographies, sometimes reading with the kids or even on my own, and I just think, those are missionaries. I don't know what I am, but those are missionaries. You know, I just think, whoa, that was, especially when you read them from a few hundred years ago when they didn't even have, you know, what any of us have today. So then you just think, whoa, those people went to die, right? To live, to go and just be done. That's it. So, but taking it to where I am in London, the thing about London is you're not going out as much as people are coming to you. I think that's really what you're saying. I mean, Islam has become the second largest religion in the nation, and Christianity keeps going down. And so people are not necessarily converting from Christianity to Islam. They're just not associating with Christianity, and that's a broad view of Christianity. I'm not even talking about evangelical. I'm talking every form of Christianity is, you know, the numbers are just dropping, and more Muslims are coming in. I may have said this here before, but the number one baby name in the country is Muhammad, because they're the ones having the children, and all this is intentional, right? And even the mayor of London is a Muslim, and many of the mayors that have been or are parts of some of the main cities in the country are, and in other leadership positions are Muslims. So it's a weird thing to just see that happening, as well as the church becoming, I mean, not the church, those who once associated with Christianity by name at least, don't even do that anymore. Those who grew up in the Church of England, they are If you go witness to them, kind of your typical, what you might think of as a Brit, they are quite turned off because of all that happened in the Church of England. So you have them not willing to even engage with the church. But all that's interesting because you're seeing this influx, you're seeing a movement now over there really among younger people, and a lot of them are from everywhere but the UK. It's quite an interesting thing. You know, our church at Grace Life London is like something like 52 nations represented in the congregation, and we're talking, 250 adults in the membership. So, these are not, if you came to the church, please come and see it. You'll see some pictures, obviously. You'll be thinking, whoa, that's not what I was expecting. And that's how I felt when I went. I was like, I don't know where you people are from. You all talk differently. That's how they can tolerate my accent. They're just like, oh, wow, it's just another one throwing the pot. So, yeah, it's just it's an interesting time over there. I tell people there was an election last year over there as well, and the simple way to explain it is Kamala won over there. So it is quite liberal, and they are making a mess of things. And the nation as a whole was already quite socialist. They wouldn't admit that, but when you see all that's happening, they have a lot of socialist policies there. So things are very expensive, and people make very little income. And so you have the aristocrats and then those who are actually not doing real well. And so it's just a very interesting situation. But in all of that, like I was saying this morning, we're constantly baptizing people and hearing their testimonies of how they were saved and all these things that the Lord is doing in the midst of the chaos there. We actually have a guy in our training center with the name of Muhammad right now. That's his name. And then we have another guy, Ramana. He doesn't go by that because it's a name connected to a Hindu deity, so he goes by the name Daniel. He's a pastor in North London. And so while all this stuff is going on, the Lord is saving people, right? And he's using all these things to bring people to hear the gospel. And so that's what excites us about it, is the Lord is actually saving people through all of this. And so while you see the chaos, you think all these things are terrible, you think, well, the Lord is moving people where he wants them to hear the message so that they can be saved and the work continues. So it's exciting.
I want to give anybody have any questions. I want to give you opportunities to ask questions too. Normally I ask all of them, but I thought maybe some of you might have some. Feel free to jump in. Kelly?
No. I mean, we're not. I guess one thing about not being so big is that you go unnoticed, and that's good. Even in 2020, when they were going to lock us down a second time, and we said no, or we just met anyway. There was some pushback from a lot of churches and really religious organizations, and they actually all got together and wrote some kind of letter to the government, to number 10, saying this is wrong. And then they all closed, and I was like, maybe don't write the letter and just open. Like, just if that's what's right, then do it. Anyway, we don't need to go there, but we just did. So, no, it's not done directly. There's nothing directly done. I mean, Ramadan is becoming more and more of a popular thing and more of a thing that's kind of taking the lead. And then someone was just telling me that even something like Easter is kind of now being kind of muted, I guess you would say, like in schools and things like that, because that's not appropriate. But then other things are being kind of lifted up. So I think things are quite subtle. They don't make a big announcement of things. They just are subtly shifting things. And they keep having babies, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. For me, when I went over there, and once again, I'm from Danville, Virginia. I'm from Dry Fork, Virginia. And I tell people, they say, where's Dry Fort, Virginia? I say, find a map and find nowhere. Put your finger on it, and you know you made it to Dry Fort. It's right there. So, so going to London, and then you're walking around, and all the heads are covered, and then the faces are covered, and you're like, whoa. And this is not just like one person. This is everywhere. You go out, you're going to see it everywhere. So for me, it was just like, and I'm just being honest here, my thought is like, who has a bomb? Like that's where my mind went. Like, whoa, this is crazy. And then eventually you kind of settle in on it and say, oh no, this is normal here. So, and then once again, they just keep having babies. But all this stuff is intentional.
Very intentional.
To take over and to have their influence. And the foolish government is basically saying, if you can get here, legally or illegally, we'll take care of you, and we'll pay for you. And everybody else's taxes go up, and they pay for them, and they pay for their children, and so they can keep having their influence and keep. So that part is, once again, that's quite a sad thing to see. At the same time, you say, okay, how do we get the gospel to these people? Right? That's God's work. Even in the foolishness of men, that's God's work. But in that, you still say, okay, but we're the church, right? We're not the government. We don't make the policies, but we do preach the gospel. So how do we get the gospel to all these people?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody recently, like, oh, Europe doesn't need missionaries. I'm like, you don't really understand what's going on over there. Islam, I've said it here in the past, I don't know the last time I said it, but the Muslims have a strategic plan to take over Europe, and one of it is through birth, but also marrying national women, like Brits or Czechs or Germans, and then impregnating them with 10, 12 kids. And there's websites where you can read about some of this stuff, but it's very intentional. I think stats aren't by like 2050, it'll be basically mostly Muslim in Europe. So we need missionaries in this part of the world. A lot of people think, oh, Islam, London, Charles Spurgeon, all these people, but they're all dead, and we're alive, and we have to preach the gospel. We have to send missionaries, so very strategic. Well, Steve, when I came here, it was reverse culture shock. So I'm still kind of like trying to wrap my mind around American culture. But now you're a pastor like me. So what are some things that just really stand out and things we should be aware of, things that maybe we should focus on in the midst of the cultural Christianity here in America?
Well, I think looking at the UK and seeing what happened there, I have a person in my church who was with military intelligence, and he told me, Stephen, you need to understand that every major city in the United States is surrounded by Islamic community centers. Every major city. Completely surrounded by Islamic community centers. They're mosques, but they call them community centers. And he said, if I told you what's going on in this country, he said, you wouldn't come out your front door. And I said, please don't tell me. It reminds me of Singapore. Singapore is a beautiful city. It was kind of it's a city-state, and it's run by the Chinese. And so they did all sorts of social experimentation. And when they had the two children, law in China, they kind of implemented it in Singapore. And because it was close to Indonesia, I had friends in Singapore, Chinese friends, and talked a lot with them, believers. And what happened was they were implementing the two-child strategy as a social experiment. And the Malaysians from Malaysia and Indonesia and so forth that lived in Singapore were just having 5, 6, 7, 10 children. And they started doing a demographic study, and they said, oh boy, this was the wrong route. And then they started having love boat sessions where they actually sent their workers who were Chinese on these these cruises to encourage them to get married and have children. The other thing that they had going was the women were becoming very educated, and the men could not marry a woman that had a college degree if they didn't have a college degree. They wouldn't marry up like that. That was just kind of an Asian thing. And so that was a real difficulty, and they began to promote, getting married, having children, and so forth. I don't know how that's going, but it's very interesting. So here in the States, talk about, reverse culture shock, big time. It's with the Sunday school this morning, I just said, when I came back after 2 decades of being over in Asia, and I left a rainforest in Indonesia and I came to Los Angeles. That was a real shock for me. But I realized that the culture had changed drastically, and I think, what you were talking about, where Christians in the UK now, they're not necessarily against Christianity, they've just kind of dropped out. We call them the nuns here, N-O-N-E. They're just not affiliated with any religion at all. They don't want to be, they're not atheistic. They're just getting like, I guess almost like France, where they're just apathetic towards religion. That's terrible. I'd rather have a radical atheist come at me so I could talk to him than somebody that's just apathetic. So they're living without God and without hope in the world, and we know that we have a sovereign God and that he saves through the gospel, so we just need to keep preaching the gospel. He'll break through to the nuns or whatever. But I do think pastors need to understand our culture. And our culture is a very complex culture in America. Postmodernism is just completely common now. That's feminism. Sorry, ladies. In our church, we have a lot of young couples, and I teach the young marrieds, and I tell the young marrieds, I said, if you're under 40 years old, chances are your husband's afraid of you. And I said, that is not good. That is not the right way to be as a Christian woman. And I said, a lot of the women are feminists, which 25 years ago, see, I'm getting old now, I can say these things. 25 years ago, we would have said they were hardcore feminists, but now they're rank and file. It's just flattened out into the whole culture. So it's a challenge to teach. And, with postmodernism, I've been told, man, your preaching is just so, what's the word that they use? I can't even think of the word they use, but, you come down so strong, you're so sure of yourself. It's not me, it's this. I'm just preaching this. So talk to God about it. Don't yell at me. I'm just the messenger. But people don't want to be told what the Word of God says concerning their lives. And they get up and leave. I don't know what it's like here, but in Minnesota, they vote with their feet. You say something that offends them, and you don't see them. You go, what happened to Jack and Jill? They're going to the church down the street, So it's a challenge. It's a real challenge to be a pastor these days.
Adam, I want to ask you, now we're now becoming your sending church. So you kind of went out, just going out to help mission for a little while. And we both, about the same time, realizing, you should have a sending church, and you desired that, and we want to try to help you in that way. So what does it mean to you now to have a sending church, and what are kind of your thoughts or expectations, or I'd like to hear from your side about that.
Yeah. I don't know how much you said it. Well, I guess I said a little bit about the way I went out. It was more just go. That wasn't good. And we're still cleaning up the issues that came along with that approach. I tell people everything I did. If you want to know what not to do, well, here you are, right? Just see my story, right? And I accept that. So now to have a sending church, to have people behind you, to have people that you know are praying for you, to have even men, the leadership to bounce ideas off of, and all these different things, a place to come back to when you're not on the field, a home base, those things which we just didn't have before. That's a big deal. And a lot goes with that, obviously. I guess you preached on that some last week. But a lot goes with that, but to know there's a place that's, okay, these people are for me. And these people are behind me, and I say me, but us, Dana and I, and the kids, and all that was happening there. That's no small thing. So, I mean, from that standpoint, it's quite a big deal. And, you know, it's the kind of things that, so the two men who planted the church, they're both from England, so they didn't go out as missionaries. They essentially went back to their home country. And then I went over, not sure how long I would be there, but then it's turned into a lot longer, and there's much work to be done there. And then in 2021, another guy came over who's from Washington State, and he came over as a missionary. And it wasn't really till he came over that I just started saying, you know, just, he'd be like, oh, what did you guys do with this, and what about that? And I'm sitting there thinking, we should have done something there, shouldn't we? You know, and it wasn't then until we started to realize, we need to, we need to fix some things and get some things cleared up. And so even, you know, the connection with the sending agency, I mean, that's going to clarify so many things for us. But I mean, I do respect Lance quite a bit, and just, you know, he knows what he's talking about. He's been out there. He's thought through it. So that means a lot to me. Just someone who's actually thought through it, who's been through it, and to have his ear. And he's a WhatsApp or even a phone call away. And so that's big to have, because the guys who are over there, they look back and they say, you know what, we didn't think about these things because we weren't missionaries. We just thought, another guy coming over. But when they went to see their parents, they got in their car and they they went down the road, you know, I mean, it was an hour or two. Or they weren't thinking about the cost of flights to go back, or churches supporting you, and how do you get back, and how is all that, or all the other things that go with it. So they didn't have to think about that. And once again, for all of us, it was more as we thought through to help this next guy come that we just thought, actually, this is a big issue that needs to get cleaned up, which is what we're doing now. And having Ascending Church is really almost step one of that things can't really get cleaned up without that first step there. So I'm really thankful for that. I'm thankful for this church and the work that's happening here, your prayers and support and everything that goes with that. It's really, really important to us.
Well, Steve is actually the one who told me about Shepherd Staff. That's the missions agency that you're with. So I give Steve the credit for that. I never heard of them, but they've been phenomenal to communicate with. And there's some sort of uprising in UK, and they sent me and you like warnings from the Department of State and safety things and all this kind of stuff a few days ago. So they're really up on things, and it's been a real blessing. So. But I was just thinking, you know, there's two other people you would know who's from Dry Fork. And I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, Pastor Barber, but wasn't Charles Stanley from Dry Fork? And A.T. Robertson. So two guys you would know from Dry Fork.
All right, A.T. Robertson.
So
if I had known, man.
Charles Stanley and A.T. Robertson. And now, Adam Waller.
Amen. Amen.
Most importantly, Adam Waller.
It's like, man, that was a big dip there, wasn't it?
If you don't know who A.T. Robertson is, he's a big Greek guy. He has a lot of commentaries and books and stuff that we all use. But Pastor Barber taught me about that.
A.T. Robertson. Wait, from Dry Fork, Virginia?
Yeah, if you look it up online, you'll see it. He's from Dry Fork, Virginia. I looked it up. He told me a couple weeks ago, and I looked it up, and it's legit. Yeah, so 3 of you.
Is his house still standing? I want to go visit, and I want to touch it and
maybe learn some
see
Greek.
If anything, see if anything comes over me. I don't know.
Anybody else have a question, Mike?
We went in 2015, so it'll be 10 years in November.
Okay, well, how can we pray for you? I'd like to close praying for you tonight, so if there's anything we can pray for you guys. Adam, I know your daughter had a surgery. She's doing okay, I'm assuming?
Yeah, Charlotte, the younger, is doing, she's doing well. She's back to whatever she was doing before, which is a little bit of everything, or a whole lot of everything. So she's well. I think they're all overall fine, health-wise, just, typical colds and small stuff. But, yeah, overall we're doing well. I guess you were getting, do you want to go first? Or you? Oh, no, go ahead. Okay. Well, I mean, we have a busy year. We have some support raising to do. So we just need to be able to make connections wherever the Lord would have us make those connections as we straighten up the things and get in place the things that we didn't have in place. That's not going to be a small thing. That's going to take quite a bit of the Lord being with us and helping us, because London is not cheap. It's actually quite expensive. And so getting the support we need won't be a small amount. It'll be a big amount, but I'm not worried about it. Just as we said this morning, pray the Lord bless us and that he provides for us in that way. So that'd be one thing. That's why we'll be back in the fall. We'll be here, but then we'll plan to visit other churches as well and tell them about what's happening in London and the need there. So just praying for that whole situation. Along with that, we're in the middle of that, we are taking steps forward with our training center and training pastors. So we are adding on years of study, which I'm heading up. So I'll be kind of managing that while seeking to raise support. So I don't know how that's going to go, but once again, the Lord can make that work. So just praying for that, for provision on the training center side, because the next step is actually quite a big one and certainly needed one. But then on our own support side, then I guess another thing you could pray for is just our church is just growing. As I said, they have baptisms today. We're going to take in members next week. Don't know how many it'll be, but most of the times it happens is somewhere between 10 and 20. The church is growing. Children are coming. We've outgrown our space for children. And so we've been praying for more space for the buildings. Well, church plan as well. We're working on church planning in the next couple of years. Lord willing, we found the guy that's would be the right guy to head that up. We need another guy with him. So we like to send them out 2 by 2 at least. But even then, I think whoever I was talking to earlier, that's a temporary fix because you send out 20 people or 30 people or even more, but the church is still growing. So just even surrounding buildings, but just to say we have 2 buildings somewhat attached to us, one on one side and one on the other, and one would take about $7 million to buy pounds, and the other one would be closer to 15 to 20 million. So, an offering tonight should fix that, shouldn't it?
Not probably.
Not quite. Yeah, but I say that the building side of it, just realize we're not talking a few thousand here, a few thousand there. We're talking on a whole nother level that, we don't have the resources to. But at the same time, the building we're in now, the chapel we're in, we've never paid anything for. The Lord just basically gave that to the church through a series of events. And that's worth millions. So on one side, we know that the Lord He can't give us in a moment. And on the other side, we just need prayer that the Lord will provide however is best and, for His purposes.
God's work done in God's way will not lack God's supply. It's the truth. I just have a simple prayer request. I'm pastoring a church in St. Paul now. It's about 15 years old. We started with 3 couples, and we're doing well, and those young couples turn out lots of babies. And we too have to expand our facility for the babies, but those young couples don't have any money, so but I've given the last 15 years of my life really, really forcefully and intentionally for the building up of that church. It's a city center church. It's just outside the city. Purposely, there's not a whole lot of gospel preaching, expository preaching churches. They've gone out. There's some out in the suburbs, but not in the city, and so we wanted to be there. So 15 years ago, I started that up thinking for the next generation. At the same time, I established LifeGate Worldwide, which is a mission organization. We're kind of a conduit, actually, to assist national or indigenous or local pastors, whatever term you want to use. I don't know what's the proper term these days, but like in Czech Republic, we've gotten behind Loiza, and I know you know Loiza here, and we support national church planners in the Philippines, hopefully in Indonesia soon, but in Germany and Switzerland, also over in Russia and Ukraine. We're supporting a church planter right on the border of the Russian border with Ukraine, and he's a dear man. So we started both of those ministries, and I've given so much of my time to the church that LifeGate, my wife refers to it as a baby that's in the bassinet, and it's still all bloody. And we need to clean up that baby and get it up and running. Church is doing okay. I'd just like prayer for the development of LifeGate. I believe this is no reflection on our American missionary here, but Americans are not appreciated overseas very much. And it's getting worse with our present leader. People in Europe are afraid of Trump. They're terribly afraid of him. And that reflects also on American missionaries, I think. So I'm really passionate about supporting men who are from their own nation that are doing church planting, that are elder qualified men, and a lot of times they'll be bivocational. Well, I'm a church planter, and trying to plant a church after working 40 hours a week plus, you will stretch out the process for years and years before you can really get off the ground. So LifeGate comes alongside these church planters and tries to raise support for them, but we do it for only 4 years, tweaking them down 25% each year. So at the end of 4 years, North American Resources are no longer supporting them. They need to become self-supporting, because I've seen what North American Resources can do to people in other countries when they're not watched over. They become dependent on North American Resources. So we're really excited about what God can do through helping along these church plants. And, just something, maybe this will help you, brother, as you raise support. I was really, really afraid of raising support. I thought it was like looking for a handout. This is when I went to the mission field in '79. And an old seasoned missionary told me, "Stephen, you got the wrong idea." He said, "What you're doing is you're providing opportunities for people here to partner with you in the work that you're going to do. And so they partner with you. They will receive rewards for what they're helping you to do. They're part of your work, and they're a very important part of your work, not just for the finances, but for the link up of prayer and so forth." So, to be able to be involved in seeing churches planted, like in Mindanao, we support missionaries in Mindanao for $250 a month. And then we begin taking them down 25%. We get to the end, 4th year, and it's like ridiculous. But that's what it costs for them to live in their economy. And they're so grateful for that. And then they have an established church in 4 years that's taking care of them as pastors. So my prayer request is basically pray that LifeGate grows, and that we can see those men supported that God raises up in other countries.
Let me pray. Father, we thank you for this time together tonight. Thank you for everyone who came on out to learn more about what you're doing in the world and learning about what you're doing through Adam and his family in London, and Steve, not only in his local church, but as the president of LifeGate, that tries to support and national church planners, and not only financially, but in other ways. And so, Lord, we do lift these brothers up, and because we know, God, that you are King of Kings and Lord of Lords, as we heard this morning, God. Our mission is to make disciples of all nations, to declare your glory, so that all the peoples may praise you. And that's accomplished primarily through evangelism and church planting. And I pray, God, that you would just bless LifeGate. I pray that you would use this ministry, Lord, to help equip and support national church planners, men who are natives, who know the language and the culture, but they just need some resources to help get this church plants off the ground. And Lord, I pray that you would bless the establishment, further development of LifeGate, and that would be a powerful tool, God, to help plant churches around the world. So thankful for Steve's leadership and his vision for this, and just pray your blessing upon it. I pray for Adam and his family. Thank you that baby Charlotte is doing much better, and that she was able to get this surgery recently. And I just pray that you be with Adam and Dana and the family as they seek to be a light for you in a dark place, a place where Christianity is fading in comparison to the growth and expansion of not only Islam, but secularism and atheism. And God, I pray that you would grant them wisdom and boldness as they take the gospel into their community. Thank you for the baptisms today and the new testimonies of salvation. We recognize it's a work of your grace. And Lord, I pray that you just give him wisdom as he leads the ministry there and the school, the Bible Institute, God, as they equip pastors. Give them wisdom as they discern how to best equip these men with limited manpower and resources. Pray that you provide the space that they need to accomplish these great things. And Lord, I do pray that you would provide financial resources for Adam and his family as they come back in the fall. Help us as a church to reach out and make contacts for them and to help them in raising these funds so that they don't have to be distracted by such trivial things, Lord, and they could focus on spiritual ministry. Pray that we would be a great support to them. And God, we do pray your blessing upon our time together.